Well, Terri, thank you so much for joining us.
So interesting. Thank you, Bilal. Appreciate it.
Welcome back to Trash Talk. Today, we have an incredible guest who's shaping the future of C&D recycling. Terri Ward is the CEO of the Construction and Demolition Recycling Association, leading efforts to keep millions of tons of building materials out of landfills and turning them into valuable resources. With over 35 years in the industry, she's worked on everything from pioneering waste processing technology to leading major recycling initiatives. Terri has also been recognised by Waste 360 by winning a Women Who Inspire Award 2025. We'll be diving into the future of C&D recycling, the biggest challenges and opportunities in the field, and her journey to becoming a leader in this space. I'm pleased to introduce Terri Ward to the Trash Talk podcast.
Very much for joining us today, Terri.
For having me.
Yeah, no problem. How I'd like to really start is understand your background, how you came into the industry, and what exposed you to C&D.
How much time do we have? It's a long story. 35 years later to think back on. Got in the industry by accident when I graduated with my undergraduate degree. Was in the middle of a recession, and I took the first job that I could get that would pay the bills so I could get my first apartment and all of that right out of college. And it happened to be for a heavy and marine construction company. And it was, I would say, a glorified secretarial position in those days. I was sitting on the estimating desk, working for about 40 different project managers and engineers and so forth that did these projects. And one of the projects that they did was for their sister company to build a state-of-the-art, I suppose, which turned out to be a very experimental solid waste composting facility, basically a garbage to compost facility. And back in those days, it was very novel and a kind of a European concept. And so I was basically outgrew my job, and they said, "Hey, do you want to go work for the sister company and help us on the contracts administration side to build this MRF, basically?" And so that's kind of how it started. I helped build it. I bought the equipment for it, and then I went out and spent a year helping commission it through some very good mentors, which we can come back and talk about later. Through that experience, I was exposed to that industry, and I've really never left it.
Was there a defining moment during your career which led you to want to be a leader in the space?
I would say not a defining moment. Probably a series of experiences. When you see things that you can change or a way you can make a difference, you want to see that happen, right? And if you're not in a leadership role, it's very hard to do that. So I think just naturally as a personality, I'm a problem solver, and I want to make change and have constant improvement and constant growth. And I think organically you become viewed as a leader if that's what you do, and then you're given the opportunity to become one.
Now, talking about the CDRA, what role do they play currently in the C&D recycling industry?
Great. Yeah, let's talk about that. So the CDRA is the Construction and Demolition Recycling Association. We are a national, the only national trade association that's dedicated to the recycling of construction and demolition debris. And so we represent primarily the MRFs, the material recycling facilities that handle C&D, the haulers, the folks that collect them, the roll-off companies that collect C&D, and then the secondary processors like shingle grinders, gypsum recyclers, all of the folks that are sort of in that value chain downstream to convert building materials into a useful product. That's our main member, but we also more recently have attracted keeping circularity in mind and how important end markets are to our members. We've invited really folks that represent the whole value chain of building materials, so the public agencies who influence policy and regulation are also members. The building materials manufacturers, or sorry, the building products manufacturers and the construction materials suppliers. They're also members. The technology providers that service the industry, the vendors, the equipment, the people that help us innovate, and really all parts of the value chain are with us now. And it's kind of an exciting time to get all folks at the table to share perspectives and figure out how can we do our part to facilitate next in line to increase recycling of C&D, and then of course do it in a way that's sustainable, not only from an environmental perspective, but also economically, because those two things go hand in hand. Really, the best policy doesn't overcome the problem, the challenge of economics. If it doesn't pay for itself, we're not going to do it, and you'll have all kinds of friction against getting it done.
What about CDRA's kind of contribution to sustainability and innovation in the industry?
Interesting you say that. We have what we call our three uniques. We collaborate, innovate, and advance. So innovation is in our DNA, or our part of our purpose for being. So it is important to us. The innovation comes, I'd like to say, I want to clarify something, because as a trade association, much of what we do is not done by me as staff. It's my role to facilitate our membership and draw out, connect people, build consensus, find where the common threads are that we need to work on as an organization. So it's really our members who are the innovators. It's really our role to sort of elevate that, strengthen how that's being done by bringing multiple parties all interested in the same things together to kind of amplify that. And so when we think about end market development, that's probably one of the most critical factors to recycling being successful. If you don't have a place for the material you extract or you recover to go, there's no point in doing this, right? So, and that's always a challenge. So we are constantly looking for new ways to do this. So for example, we have, we put on a shingle recycling forum, and shingles, asphalt roofing shingles, are really a challenge. They're very recyclable. There are end markets that are viable, but there's been some past experiences that haven't been great. So one of the applications you can use shingles for is in hot mix asphalt to build new roads. So we kind of call it a roof to roads. It's been challenged quite a bit because some things were done back in the early days. The technology wasn't quite right. The mixes weren't quite right. The quality of the materials being used. So it really scared off the market. A lot of departments of transportation, states won't allow us to use it. But it's still a very important material. And so we have a very vibrant shingle recycling committee that brings the best and brightest minds from that space together. And so we have the roofing manufacturers who are very interested in trying to find ways to reuse that material and ultimately bring it back into new shingles, like a closed loop situation. And there's some very large companies. And then we have our very small recyclers who are just kind of scraping by trying to make a living, who need these end markets. And then all of the people that can help make a difference and influence policy. That to me is and we're starting to make some traction, I guess was my point. So innovation can come in many ways. It doesn't have to be, breakthrough research or some, great new machine that can get the job done. Those are things we also facilitate, but sometimes it's simply creating that critical mass, right, to get people talking so that naturally that innovation occurs. And that's something we're seeing in the shingle recycling space. It's really exciting. It's got a long way to go, but we're seeing progress. And I think it is because we facilitate those conversations and we bring those people together with a common goal, and it's working.
I've had a number of conversations this week, with different people, and you mentioned their end markets obviously being a challenge, but also regulations as well, certain regulatory challenges. For the CDRA at the moment, what do you see as the kind of priority right now?
Probably if there was one thing that I should be getting across as a voice of the industry and face of the industry, I would say, and this is very much related to regulation, but other things as well. And I would say it's, I think I could put it best by saying fairness. We are looking for a level playing field. And what's happened, and you can kind of understand how it could happen. You know, we have our cities and our counties, our states, our local jurisdictions that want to see more recycling, and they feel, you know, pressured by their constituents. The expectations are to continue to increase recycling, improve sustainability efforts, and zero waste, and all the things that we strive for that tend to be kind of aspirational, but sometimes it results in policy that is unachievable. And so what happens, for example, let's say we have a county or even a state that is mandating 65% recycling of all C&D. That sounds great, and that assumes that that's possible. It's completely dependent on the material stream that you're talking about. If it's concrete, rubble being taken down from say, a building demolition, very heavy material, highly recyclable, usually not a lot of contamination, and you'll see very high recycling rates. A lot of that's done on the job site. Metal is another one that's highly recyclable, has value, so it tends to get done maybe as more of a source separation at the job site. And then there's all the other stuff that's left over that we call mixed C&D recycling, and that will go to a MRF who's invested in the machinery, the systems, the screens, the sorting systems, sometimes very elaborate, optical sorting and air density separation and all the things that you see like in a single stream plant that's very sophisticated. Some of these are a little simpler and a little more robust because construction demolition debris is big and it's heavy and so forth. But the bottom line in that is that it's very hard to achieve something like a 65% recovery rate coming out of a MRF, especially when some of the inputs are kind of the leftovers, if you will, or the product mix is changing because we've had sustainability efforts on the building product side. So we have more MDF board to lightweight to lower the carbon footprint in some materials. And that kind of stuff is very hard to recycle. A lot of times because it's a different industry and they're trying to appeal to consumers and either have a certain look, right, or a certain performance characteristic, not necessarily thinking about end-of-life decisions. So a 2x4, old stick-built homes that we used to make, highly recyclable. We love that. We call that A-grade wood when it comes in, right? But that fancy, wood slatted wall behind you comes in, and it's probably not even wood, but anyway, things like that come in, and it's like, what can we do with those materials? So, sorry, it's a long way of saying and a long story that says anytime you set an unachievable goal, you're inviting cheaters, liars, fraud. Yeah. And again, I'm using pretty severe terms, but look, we all kind of like filing your taxes. I'm going to get away with what I can get away with, as long as I'm kind of in the lines or close to the lines. We don't have a lot of enforcement. We don't have like IRS agents out there auditing and looking at the recovery rates that are reported by facilities. So, Joe Blow can set up a pick and dump or have a basically yard where the material comes in, and they, kind of pick up some of the big metal with a material handler, and the rest goes to landfill, and they'll sign a ticket that says, we got your 65%, your 75% here, Mr. Project Manager, be happy. That's really not fair, right? Because our members have invested millions in the technology and the labor and created the environment, and they're good stewards and trying to do the right thing. But they're going to be honest and report what they're really getting, and that's going to end up costing in business if we're not all playing by the same rules. So one of the things that is very important to us is to advocate for policy that would require a third-party certification, let's say, where There's an ISO protocol that comes in, views your books, your scale tickets, validates, that you are doing what you're saying you're doing, that your materials are going to an end use that qualifies as recycling, et cetera. And so basically it's saying we're walking the talk, right?
Yeah.
And so policy can support that and say, if recycling is important to us and we're going to set a standard, why don't we set that standard so that what we're asking for, we're more sure that it's actually going to happen. And that creates more fairness. It creates more consistency and certainty in a marketplace so that our members want to continue to invest because they have healthy businesses and they want to attract more materials. So they're going to continue to innovate and get those recycling rates up because they've got a good, solid, business to rely on.
What looks like a typical day for Terri Ward?
Well, this week probably wasn't typical, but it's something I think about for a bit more than a week. We had our annual conference we call C&D World here in Dallas, and there's a tremendous amount of work that goes into putting on a conference like this. We have really good people behind us that handle what I would call the logistics, making sure we have the venue set up and the food and beverages are there and the exhibitors are brought into the hall, et cetera. Of course, my job is to make sure to influence that and that it's a good experience for everyone. But I've worked for probably the last, 4 or 5 months on the content for that conference. And we had 2 full days of pretty meaty topics and areas we wanted to cover and bring in experts for. So that program, that aspect of the conference was something that, was months in the making and in bringing, we do a lot of panel discussions. So finding the people that are going to provide the right perspective and that, they can articulate it on stage and you find moderators that the same way that kind of draw out what you're trying to do. It's not an easy task because there's really smart people that don't like to talk or maybe are uncomfortable sharing certain things, but I think we're fortunate to have a great network through all of our members and those that they do business with. So we had some really phenomenal speakers and I think some great content that people really appreciated. So that's a week in the life, and we have a couple of events that we do like that, the Shingle Recycling Forum I mentioned, and then I'm often out at other events like that are sort of adjacent to us. So I might go to a state recycling conference or a regional recycling conference and speak on behalf of the industry and talk about these things you and I are talking about that are so important to provide that perspective to folks in that area. And at the same time, get input from our members in the area. What is your specific challenge here in this marketplace or in this state from a policy perspective? So it's a lot of interchange with our membership, with the market, with, again, the folks that are adjacent to it. I really need to be thinking, stay exposed to and be thinking what I always like to call 360 degrees, right?
Yeah.
Because we're all affected by those things, the external forces and so forth. So that's a lot of what I do, and then just the day-to-day discussions with our members who are looking for information, have questions. I'm connecting members to members who have expertise in certain areas, or member has a problem with a regulation, right? Or maybe a material stream or a technology question. I'll connect them to our vendors or someone in another state that maybe does the same thing. So it's varied and it's challenging and it's but very rewarding because I think I'm in the unique position of being exposed to many aspects of the industry through my career. And let's face it, 35 years is a long time, so you tend to absorb a lot of information that you probably never going to use all of it, but there's almost no topic in our industry that comes up that I haven't been exposed to in some way. So I feel like I'm kind of uniquely qualified to be sort of that jack of all trades, if you will. So if something comes up, hey, I may not have the answer, but I know somebody or who knows somebody, or let's find the answer together.
And are there any leadership philosophies that you followed throughout your career that have kind of helped you get here now?
I think I mentioned earlier that I was fortunate to have some mentors.
Yeah.
So I have to admit, many of my philosophies, I use them. I can't claim them as mine because, from my first, I guess, real management job, I think I was 24 years old, working for a brilliant man who is a very successful entrepreneur. And I would say he's a great leader, not always the best manager and people person, but a great leader. And so I watched and listened and learned, worked for him for almost 25 years of my career, so a big influence in my life. I've often said I should write a book, one of those easy reads that has all of the philosophies. So it's things like, if not me, who? If not now, when? And it's probably he didn't coin that term, but it's something I saw used day by day. And it really is about taking personal responsibility. If you see something and you can make a difference, then do it, right? You don't need to be blessed or empowered or be given a CEO role to make a decision and take an action that you know is right. And so I think that is leadership. And I think those are some of I think you have to develop good self-esteem. You have to develop a good thick skin and backbone because you don't always get it right. And there were a lot of times that maybe I thought I was right, but he didn't think I was right. So you get challenged in a way that I'm going to have to defend that decision, right? So I better be prepared to. I better think it through. So I referred to 360 degrees before. I feel like that's something I constantly use. I'm all about perspective because I don't have all the answers, but if I listen and I'm curious and I try to look at other people's perspective and get input, I find that good decisions or the answer or the right thing to do, it usually makes it self-evident. So I feel like if you're not comfortable making a decision, it's probably because you don't have all the information you need and maybe you don't need to make that decision. Again, kind of a long story, but it weaves together how I like to operate daily. And I don't know that you call that leadership. Maybe it's a personality trait. Maybe it's just, kind of your DNA. But I believe when you look at things that way, then you tend to be, again, if you're viewed as a leader, you're given opportunities to have leadership roles, and that just sort of builds on itself, and you gain that confidence, and you gain more knowledge, and pretty soon somebody's looking at you saying, you're a leader. Oh, I didn't know that. The fact you wanted me to come sit in your podcast, thank you. I feel I'm flattered.
Being the leader of an association puts you in quite a unique spot because you're not just kind of working with technology companies, just the recyclers, as you mentioned before, and the whole gambit of the C&D world. How do you stay informed? And within the industry, what tools do you use?
I think I started my professional life back in the day when there was a saying that's knowledge is power, and I never ascribed to kind of the power part of it, but the whole piece of that is educate yourself. I really value my sleep, but it's not unusual that, as I go to bed and I'm flipping through my phone now, it used to be something else, but flip through my phone, and if I see a headline that I often spend, an hour and a half before I get to sleep, flipping through headlines, and that usually sends me down, the whole Google's an amazing and a terrifying, it's like the love-hate relationship. There's almost no, there are no unanswered questions, as they say, and I'm curious by nature. So it's just, what do you find interesting, and then learn something about it, and if you don't understand it, keep going until you do. I was blessed and cursed to be a non-technical person by education and training. I'm not an engineer. I've worked with a lot of engineers pretty much my whole life from the first job that I mentioned to you, and I've managed engineers. So I believe I've developed this, a good understanding of kind of how things line up and think a little bit in technical terms, but I'm very aware of what I don't know. And I know I've driven a lot of engineers crazy who have become very good friends because I'm going to keep asking questions until I get it, because it drives me crazy if I don't get it. And what I mean by get it is something has to make sense to me. It has to be logical. And there's something to be said for, hey, if you're not getting it, then you're missing some key ingredient about whatever that topic is. So I think, and maybe this is good advice for someone, as we think about, there's some legacy here. I look back and I really value, young people. I have a 25-year-old son who he doesn't want to listen to mom, but I try to, instill these values and everything in him. So I try to share the knowledge. But I think one of the most valuable things when I was that age was to not be embarrassed or ashamed that I didn't know something, because the rewards of asking those dumb questions were tenfold anything that was the discomfort of admitting you didn't know the answer. And so I guess that's a piece of advice I would say, and what's served me well is ask until you get it. And, that's served me well.
I love that answer, because all, the most successful people I know, first thing they do is ask questions. And, just being inquisitive generally about anything and everything shows, someone wants to be the best, and they want to learn and understand. And so it's a great piece of advice there. What do you see as currently some of the biggest challenges in the C&D recycling industry?
I'm going to say this not on behalf of the association, really my personal view. And I know a lot of my members would probably agree, but again, it's kind of not the position we would take. I think we have I think C&D recycling, maybe maybe recycling in general, has a little bit of a perception problem, a little bit of an identity crisis. I can't remember a time when recycling, just from kind of the outside communities, the whether it's our policymakers, our cities, counties, the academics, all talking about waste, the sustainability community, which is, really strengthening, and the kids that are going into college now are getting sustainability degrees, right? What does that mean? Well, it means a lot of things, different things to different people. But my point in saying that is that I feel like when I grew up, recycling was aspirational. It was this redeeming thing, and the fact I worked for a company that supported recycling made me feel like I was doing something great for the planet. I was proud to have that job. And I think you talk to people now and it's like, well, recycling's kind of a sham, isn't it? It's not really being recycled. Most curbside, has gotten some bad headlines, right? Yeah, we separate the cans and bottles, we put them at the street, and then we find out they're getting dumped in the landfill. Things like that. I think we need to do a better job of communicating the true benefits of recycling and demonstrating what we really are doing. And so it's a threat in that by not doing that, there's other external forces, whether it's the mandating of recycling to a point where our businesses are not thriving because we're spending so much time either fighting regulation, influencing it, or complying with it, rather than doing the work of recycling, right? It's a big distraction. The alternatives to recycling, which is also kind of a policy. So you have these kind of new ideas of salvage and reuse, for example. Like if you looked at the waste hierarchy, in some models that you see these days, recycling's just right there, just on the edge above landfilling. And then you have like these 5 or 6 other things above it, from salvage, repurposing, reuse, give it 5 or 6. Obviously, you have the old reduce, reuse, recycle, but there's a bunch more R's in between there now. Yeah. And you see policy being developed around that says, really, recycling's now the last resort. And that's scary to me, because that means we're going to take these materials out of the recycling chain and do something different. There'll be new business opportunities for somebody to go in and hand dismantle. I'm being a little sarcastic here, but going in and pulling out 2x4 by 2x4 when you're going to, let's say, redo this interior here. And now we're going to try to stitch 2x4s back together that maybe were broken, repair them, and then go put them at a restore yard to resell. That all sounds redeeming well. And, there's people that will use that. It sounds great. But when you think about the fact that we generate 600 million tons a year of C&D debris and the practicality of handling that volume of material manually, again, when all we've been trying to do is automate and make things easier and make pure materials as we run them. And I'm all for doing things that make sense, right? And there are often times where that reuse is a good idea. But again, you have unintended consequences like the resale shops that come up that are supposed to take these materials and they're nonprofits usually. We've seen some stories where those materials come out, maybe it's a publicly funded project, lots of grant money and things, and everybody's proud of touting what they reused, and you find out it's kind of the same thing. You're creating warehouses of materials that then still have to be sold. They have to be stored until there is a buyer for it, and then maybe come the end of the year, it all ends up in the landfill anyway. And again, who's policing that? Who's auditing that? It's just this feel good that said, hey, we're reusing this stuff, that must be good, right? And so is it really moving the needle, or is it just a feel good policy that isn't being real about what's economically viable and what isn't? So I think there's all kinds of little things that come out like that again make it harder and harder for MRFs who have invested, who do a good job recycling and recovering. But that's a threat that we have to be aware of. So I think we need to spend some time quantifying our positive environmental impact. Really show, you can't do enough tours. The tour I was on this morning that gave me my hard hat hair. Yeah. People are amazed, right? If there's somebody that's skeptical about recycling, go out to Big City Crushed Concrete where we were today, and it's just amazing. Somebody that sees that, the size, the scale of all this concrete that's being repurposed and being used in place of virgin rock. Now we don't have to mine new material and truck it hundreds of miles to build new roads. We can reuse what we've done here, what's been used and can be repurposed. It's impressive. And our business, our members are doing really valuable things that are good for from many different aspects. We just need to share that, I think, more and more.
It's clear there's obviously an education piece that is kind of missing almost as well across recycling. Is there scope for, all the associations within the recycling industry to kind of come together and kind of put their heads together on how that education could be better, kind of communicated, whether that be to young people in colleges, schools, and so on, or things of that nature?
Great question. I think generally, yes, there's room for it. I think each association exists for a slightly different purpose. So, for example, C&D is a very different material stream, a very different way of educating than, let's say, our curbside. So again, my friends over at NWA probably would say, no, it's not, you don't get it. But to me, it's a lot easier to identify with recycling bottles and cans because, look, as human beings, as consumers, we all use those on a daily basis. And we have to, find a place to put my plastic water bottle, which I feel bad because I'm a recycler. But I'm traveling and anyway, no room for my big water bottle I use at home. But point being, it's very identifiable. It's easy. It's a consumer-based waste materials. We're all responsible for that. So that's a whole different education process. When it comes to C&D material, people don't really care about it. How there isn't that much generated by an individual. Maybe you do a remodel and you hire a contractor and it's kind of like, yeah, they need to bring the roll off, get it out of here. It's not in your face, right? And a lot of it's generated more on an industrial scale, like through a big general contractor who's taking a building down or a builder who's building a home. We're not really there through that whole process as a consumer, so we don't see it. So it's a little bit out of sight, out of mind. So I think it would be a whole different positioning and kind of to a different audience in a way. But I do think that I think it's relevant across industries and across associations. I think it's a common thread that we all need to do a better job. And I think really if like the folks at NWRA spent some time, helping, and they do a good job of that. But I think if the general public had a better view of recycling the bottles and cans, that would spill over to the C&D, I think, a little bit too. Generally, recycling needs to be, we need to do good business, be good stewards of the environment, do what we say we're going to do, and then share examples of that.
And what do you see as the biggest opportunities in the C&D recycling world?
I'm going to answer that a little bit differently because I think it's different for every company in different regions because the material streams are different. The reality, local economics, a lot of things are different. For example, and you hear this a lot in the waste business, what happens on the coasts, maybe we like to say what happens in California is going to happen in Oregon and Washington next, and then probably Massachusetts, and eventually, it'll come in and both coasts will be doing it, and the middle part of the country kind of has their own deal, and they struggle because landfill rates are still cheap. So it's hard to incentivize recycling when, again, ultimately it comes down to economics. There have to be good drivers for it. So I don't have the best answer for where the opportunity is. I would say we probably have I think we have the best opportunity to do what I just said in terms of helping ourselves promote our industry. I think more now than ever, there's a desire to have data relative to environmental impact. And I don't think this is a question of really if sustainability as a I'm not trying to get into say the whole ESG thing and publicly held companies having to track their carbon footprint. I just think we're in an age where data is probably easier than ever to acquire. The studies can be done. There is science behind environmental impact, and I think we have an opportunity to position our industry better by supporting some of the things like a life cycle assessment that actually gives a quantifiable benefit to recycling a material in one way versus landfilling it or recycling it in another way. Again, like I said, knowledge is power, and I believe that there is probably one right answer if you have all the information, and data is the start of that. So I think there's a way to modernize how we think about C&D recycling and kind of bring it up with where the municipal recycling's been, curbside. There's quite a bit more data available and data-driven MRFs and things like that I think would help us get that data that would help us tell our story. I also think that we are gaining ground with some of the advocacy that we're doing on this whole issue of fairness and accountability and transparency. For example, there's if you know anything about LEED certification, which is basically, I think for most people, if they're not familiar with LEED, you look at a new public building and there's always that big, gold plaque out there or logo that says, hey, we're a LEED platinum certified building or whatever. It means they've done all the things, checked the box, done all the things necessary to acquire this, sustainability status. So the LEED program is very influential in the C&D recycling space because there's a lot of the large companies, a lot of the large contractors, the big companies that own buildings, the Apple Computers when they build a new campus or a new manufacturing plant or data center or what have you, they'll want that project LEED certified. And so LEED helps support recycling because you get credit towards your LEED certification if you recycle materials. And one of the things this new draft or the new version that will be voted on at the end of this month incorporates a change that will drive more of the third-party verification for a MRF. And I won't get into the specifics of it, but I think it's a big win for our industry, and it will, for those of our members who are, there's a program that exists, we call it RCI, or Recycling Certification Institute, which is really the only ISO level program out there to do a third-party verification of your recycling rate. Basically, again, it's if you're going to report that your facility's recycling 75%, here's a program, somebody came in, audited you, and you can take that to the bank that that's what is really happening instead of the false tickets that I mentioned earlier. So basically, LEED is going to promote more facilities to be RCI certified. And I think that's good for business because it's going to, I think, lift up the industry and require more facilities to do the right thing and do what they say they're doing. So I think that is an opportunity to help grow our businesses, and at least those that operate in that way are going to get more business, and that's a good opportunity.
Are there any policies at the moment that you think, if they were introduced, would help accelerate progress in C&D recycling?
I think what we just talked about is one of those, and I think there's an opportunity to do that more broadly. LEED is a start because it drives a lot of the larger scale projects and a lot of public projects, but I think there are opportunities for say statewide adoption of third-party verification. For example, California is a good example where there are some counties that require it, and it has actually shown that the recovery rates are coming up as a result of that policy. But it's a little bit of a patchwork of a city here and there, a county here and there. I believe LA County does it. I believe San Francisco does a version of it, and there is discussion about California adopting a statewide standard for that. We'd really like to see that happen. And again, our belief is if it gets done in California, then other states will pick it up, and that will be good for the industry. So many of our members are involved in that and working hard on that. We have one of our board members who was very active in the advisory group that works on the new LEED programs, and so that change that LEED made was very much from CDRA pushing our members and our committee meetings and things like that, and writing letters. So we had a direct influence on that, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud of our members who care about that and get involved, and you can see we can make progress. We can make change. And I think we're also gaining ground, as I mentioned before, where we include policymakers, right? I'm not sure how many associations include their local, basically local regulator. We're inviting them to the table, basically. I think there used to be this idea that we don't want to let them into our plant. We want to, hey, they're coming, everybody straighten up. We want to look good. You know what? We take the attitude that we want them. Come see us on our best day and our worst day. Come anytime, because we want you to understand the realities. This business is hard. It's difficult. It's labor intensive. It's capital intensive. If you understand more and better about what it takes for us to be successful, then you'll be much better educated when you introduce a policy. It'll have less unintended consequences. Maybe, in fact, it will move the needle because it is well-informed policy.
What were some of the biggest professional challenges you might have faced kind of on your way to leadership in this industry?
This is a fun one, especially with you, Bilal, and your business and what you do. I want to just take a second to acknowledge why we're here and what you do as a company and as a professional. I can't remember how long I've known you, but I've known of you before you and I ever met face to face, because I used to get phone calls from you, or friends that got phone calls from you who called and said, hey, I just got a call from Bilal and there's this opportunity. What do you think of it? And I said, well, if he's calling you, then it's a real opportunity, and I think you have a keen sense of people and putting right people in the right seat. You have a great network. You clearly ask questions. You understand what companies are looking for and kind of what the skill sets are needed, and then you do a good job of finding those people that fit those roles. Anyway, so it's kind of that HR side. And as I think of times that you would call me, and I, again, was flattered. You never placed me somewhere, but usually it was because I knew better than you did that the particular role or the company that probably wasn't going to be a good fit for me. And if you had called me for one that was, then we probably would have, we would have been able to do some business together. But I think lots of challenges, obviously, and we could talk 2 hours on this topic. And I try to be careful because I think, especially being a female in a very male dominated, male oriented business, there's some obvious challenges that you can imagine, especially when I was much younger and much less educated and experienced. I'm so sorry. Our industry doesn't tolerate people that don't add value, and then put on top of that being female, kind of a couple strikes against me for many years. How can I say it? Because I don't like to play the female card. I really don't. And I don't like to be recognized for, hey, she's really good. Well, I think sometimes I get recognition because I'm female, and I don't like that. I want to be recognized because I'm good. I'm smart. I'm experienced. I have the answers. I'm adding value, right? It doesn't matter. But as I've aged, I'm becoming more tolerant of that recognition, and I know it's well intended, and I can look back and say, man, I survived some pretty rough experiences, and now I'm here, right? So in many ways, I'm proud of myself, but I will tell you, it comes back to, because you're probably going to ask me, some of the follow-on questions. So let me answer one of them probably for you, because it's something I really like to share with younger people, male or female, really. But one of the things that I did, and I'm pretty intuitive. I think I have good fortune. We all kind of have some gifts in life, and they're different for everybody. For me, I feel like I read people really well, and I feel things. So I know immediately if what I'm saying is not hitting someone well, and I'm not being perceived well. It kind of sucks, because we all want to think everybody likes us and respects us and all of that. But there were, early in my career, I could see, I'd be going to a transfer station or a recycling yard or something, and I'm there selling equipment for much of my career, selling capital equipment, processing equipment. And I walk in there, especially again when I was younger, and the questions I would be asked about the equipment, and I clearly couldn't answer. Again, I'm not an engineer, so what kind of gearbox, and what kind of maintenance is required. When are we going to have to, I'm not a mechanic, let's put it that way, right? And that's a lot of what my customer base wanted to know, the maintenance requirements and stuff. So I couldn't answer a lot of that. But even when I was learning what the equipment could do and how it could perform, I found myself in one situation just knowing full on that I was vulnerable, with a business owner who just wasn't going to have it. Like, what's this chick going to come in and tell me, right? What does she know? And I read that right away. And so what I did, it was a defense mechanism, but honestly, I adopted this, and it's become one of my greatest strengths, and it's a tool, and it comes back to that asking questions. And I found when you can't answer somebody's question, you answer a question with a question. And all of a sudden, you look really smart, because they're not there. They don't want to listen to you. they really want you to listen to them. And it's building that relationship of trust. And I found the magic was happening when I did that. And I can't tell you, I ended up making the deal from that very uncomfortable sales call that I thought I absolutely failed. And I realized the whole time, and I had a dealer with me, the whole time I was asking questions. I don't know that I really ever gave him any good content, but I wanted to learn and I wanted to find out, what problem is he trying to solve? How can I solve it? What would work? What would success look like for him? What were his challenges? And I learned so much about the big picture of his business, which is something I have, I had training in, at least education and some experience with. I always come at things from a business mind. I got feedback both from the dealer and then afterwards from the gentleman that bought for me. Wow, she's really smart. She knows her stuff. I said nothing. I asked questions and I listened. And that struck me for many, many years. So I give that advice. I say, look, if you find yourself in a spot where you don't have all the answers, it's okay. Again, your job's to get the answers. It's not to know everything, but you're not going to know if you don't ask the questions. And you might just find that asking questions is going to get you the deal. Because again, people buy from people. People want relationships with people. They don't want to sit and listen to what you think a sales pitch is or what you think they want to know. You need to get to know them and find out what do they need. And that's listening, right? And that's asking questions. So it's a way of saying my challenge. I think for everybody, take your greatest weakness and turn it into your greatest strength, or try, right? And that can do magic. I still think today, I think in some ways there still are significant challenges, especially it's one thing to kind of be a technology expert, right? Or an applications salesperson or sales manager or whatever you are. It's one thing when you're given the opportunity to be, in a leadership position where the buck stops there, right? And you're you're responsible for everything, right? I still think we all have our biases. We all have our difficulties. I feel not often, but I still feel the difference. I feel like I do get treated differently. The critiques and the criticisms or the questions about what I do or a decision I make, I really don't think sometimes would ever be made about if it was a male sitting here. I don't think oftentimes, and I think it's because we are different. I used to think I can do anything a man can do and just the same and all of that. And I realized pretty early in my career and as I aged, it's like a lot of things. We shouldn't be the same. We should be different. We should leverage those things that are different about us and look at them as gifts, right? If we were all the same, how boring would that be? Yeah. So I try to take what I know are my strengths and lean into them, own them. I will make decisions from a different perspective. I don't expect you to understand it. I expect the respect. And if you don't understand it, let's have a conversation about it, because I can share why I made the decision I made. I can share my perspective. So I think we still have to be careful, even this day and age, to just respect each other as human beings and realize it doesn't matter, your sex, your orientation, your skin color. It's that stuff still doesn't matter today. It's who you are as a human, right? So I think we still have a ways to go.
Thanks a lot for that. That was a very powerful answer. And now on that note, cuts out the bag a little bit. I wanted to say a massive congratulations to you by being awarded by Waste 360, Women Who Inspire. Oh. So that's
Thank you.
A huge congratulations. I'm sure everyone, members of the CDRA, very well deserved for you.
That's a tough one. Again, I said I don't like to be recognized for being female. I really don't. And so I wasn't sure how to take that award to begin with. I actually thought it was kind of a joke in my inbox. I thought, oh, it's spam, like the who's who, pay $1,000 and you'll get in the book. I get those often. But then I looked and saw I'm right next to Tara Hemmer from WM. That's really freaking cool. So I am honored. I'm flattered. I appreciate it.
As you mentioned earlier, you have to own it. Absolutely own it, and of course you have been. A lot of females that I speak to that are in the professional roles, not just recycling but overall,
Sure.
they have this feeling of they almost have to work harder than their male counterparts. Has that been a similar kind of feeling throughout your career? Would you say in some ways?
I think I was blessed, and I have to give props because I mentioned mentors. One of my best mentors was my father, and he was a great mentor. We were a big sports family. My dad was an educator and a coach and a semi-pro athlete of 5 sports. He played 5 sports in college. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. I've never heard of it. I don't know how he did it. Back in the day, of course,
Sure.
that was more doable than it is today. So I really didn't have a choice other than to be coached every day of my life. And if you know the old style coaching, what is success? I'm probably the hardest. So it's not really a great thing. You become a high achiever or think you need to constantly achieve, and that it's never good enough, right? Because you can score 15 points in a basketball game and turn around and, hey, that's great, baby girl. Next time you're going to get 18 points, right? There's always this constant improvement mindset. So that kind of instills in you that you're never good enough. So I probably grew up with that anyway and have that personality tendency. But I do think I felt it every day and I'm not going to blame this industry because I think it transcends industries. I think part of it's how we feel as women and some of our, female genetics that make us feel less than, it's just evolution. But I think as a society, we won't be respected unless we stand out, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so, yes, you have to do more. You have to be better. You have to differentiate yourself.
Do you think there still are barriers for women looking to enter the industry, and what more could we do to reduce that?
I don't know how to answer that because, yes, I think there are barriers, but I'm also going to own up to the fact that I have to own and admit that some of my success is because I'm female.
Right.
And it's kind of a backward way of saying, if you stand out, it's not that hard to differentiate yourself. I had the benefit of being memorable. And again, in a sales role or in a leadership role, being remembered, having people think of you when a topic comes up is powerful. So I think there are just as many opportunities to excel or to leverage. Again, it's kind of basic marketing. Differentiate yourself, whether you're female or male. I still think there's room for more women. I'm really encouraged, and we have some dynamo younger, especially younger female members. I think so. It's changing. There aren't as many, in my age group, right? But we just brought in a new board member, a young lady out of New York. Dynamo, nice woman. Differentiates herself for the exact same reason I said. She took the initiative, came to, not a board member, just an interested member, came to some of our board meetings because they're open, wanted to learn, sat down, not afraid to sit with the business owners that are our board, right? Most of them are operators and leaders, significant leaders in the industry. And she sits down very comfortably, at a reception or a networking gig and asks questions. And I'm so turned on by that. And again, just, I want to, and I know our members saw that. And it really didn't matter that she's female or male. Here's a young person taking the initiative, asking the questions, being curious, being interested. And I kind of thought, hey, that's probably how that customer way back when saw me and why he had the confidence in me. So it's been a couple of years. We've gotten to know her, and our board voted her on, so she's a board member now. So I think there's as much opportunity as there are barriers. It just still takes the work. And again, I think she differentiated herself, which is kind of a marketing thing just for you, right? Same kind of thing. You try to do it every day, doing this podcast, right? Going to the conferences. How many recruiters were here?
Yeah, that's true.
Right? You have a captive audience. This is your market. These are going to be your customers because you're here.
So this year's theme for International Women's Day was accelerating action. Based on everything that we've already discussed and thinking about from a C&D perspective, how can we accelerate action, or what's the most effective way for us to accelerate action for women in the C&D industry?
We actually talked about this last night as kind of, we did a little debrief on our conference, right? Which, I really appreciate our board president, phenomenal leader in his own right, and very servant leader oriented. And we've had this debate about wanting to have a women in C&D panel, right? And have the women leaders, because we do have some.
Yeah.
In fact, our new director of operations was a CEO of a C&D recycling company, Andrea Johnson. She's a phenomenal resource, and I'm thrilled to have her on our team. So we think of people like Andy, and some of the other business owners, Kathy Paulus out of that runs phenomenal shingle recycling and C&D recycling operation in the Midwest. There are some great examples of powerful women, and I really struggle with this one because for the same reason I don't like the recognition of a women's specific award. I don't like to reinforce that. But at the same time, again, as I'm mellowing in my old age, I realize the power of setting an example and sort of sharing that. So I kind of feel like it's my obligation to, how are you going to change things unless you, again, send the message that, hey, there are some excellent examples of women in leadership in C&D, and it probably is my job to support that and help amplify it. So as I'm talking to you and I'm kind of coming to this realization, I really should support that idea, and I probably will now, but I've been struggling with it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think, again, we need to, it comes back to my original PR message, right? We need to tell the story of what we're doing and show that it can be done, and not have people second guessing us because they're seeing, examples of where it is being done well, and maybe help earn some respect in that way.
And what is one piece of advice you'd give to young professionals that are looking to enter the C&D industry?
Ask questions.
Theme of the day.
Yeah. I mean, again, be curious, and look, I see examples every day. The older I get, of course, the more young people I see, right? But I love seeing the second generation, the next generation of some of our longtime members. There's phenomenal examples, and of course they're not so young anymore. They remind me of that. But I think of William Cooper, who was one of our moderators and is one of our board members. He's next generation, and a young guy definitely should be up for one of the next 40 under 40 type awards, right? Phenomenal, smart. I learn from him every day.
From a recruiting perspective and your experience, how important has it been having the right people?
It's so important. I think if we had what we call the executive leadership panel yesterday, and again, 5 dynamic leaders, very successful people in the C&D recycling space on a panel, and I think almost without fail, they all said that version of right people, right seat, meaning you can't, I think one of them said basically, you really can't change the nature of people. You can train skills, but you really can't. There's some things you can't make, like an introvert into an extrovert, right? Or so you just can't change the nature of people, and you need to be honest with yourself. If you have somebody that really isn't shining in a position, you have to have the courage to make that change and find a role that is better suited for them. And I've lived through that a few times where you really struggle with, if this isn't working out, we want to give people the benefit of the doubt, and you want to train and give all these second chances and sit down and counsel. And there have been times where I've really regretted that, because as a leader, a manager, it drains a lot of your energy. And I think once you solve that problem and you get the right person in that seat, you realize the sky opens up, and now it's like the plus, because you're not having the energy sucked out of you dealing with this person that wasn't in the right seat. You're getting the benefit and the win and all the help and the accelerate, to use your word, accelerate in the direction you want to go, because you have the right person in the seat now. So I really do, I take that to heart and think with age and experience, I can't tolerate, and I don't mean that in a selfish way. I mean, it isn't worth living through, make a correction. And I think you deal with people fairly and honestly and openly and transparently, and generally they know it's not working out, right? So that's tough sometimes. But the trickier part is finding that right person for the right seat. So back to your question about a recruiter, I think it's absolutely, obviously for certain position, your labor positions, there's different, tools for that. But if you are looking for a leadership position, a higher level manager, maybe, you and I have talked about this day and age with the sophistication of equipment and mechanization, automation. There's a pretty big need for, process engineering types, right? People that can really deal with the data and deal with the flow of equipment and how it should perform, rather than just, being a people manager, right? That's becoming probably less and less important. Those people are really hard to find.
Yeah.
And I think that, again, is an opportunity. You really need to, I think, lean into a recruiter that can expand your lens in finding the right person. And it is a talent, right, to know people and to know. I've seen many examples where you've put the right person in the right seat and it makes a difference. So that's a skill, right? It's your profession and you do a great job at it. Not my skill. I don't do it every day, so I'm probably not the person that should do that. And I will say we got very lucky in hiring Andrea, who I mentioned earlier, and we actually the board approved putting a recruiting fee in our budget to find this director of operations position, because it was so important. And we weren't sure we'd be able to find that person on our own. We got lucky, so we're saving the recruiting fee, right? But so I think it's incredibly important, and I would highly encourage working with a professional recruiter.
CDRA, what's next for the CDRA?
I'll be honest on this one. I'd like to say something grander. What our next big policy move or our next big event. And yes, we're doing some cool things like some of the LCA, the life cycle assessments. We're doing some of those things. But the nuts and bolts of what my next quarter looks like is that we're changing our management structure. And I call it building the foundation. And part of this, you say accelerate. I really think it's important for growth, and we are growing. It's our intent to grow, not for the sake of like building a business like you would, as for your stakeholders. This is really for the good of the industry. We need to grow. We need to expand our influence to help us make change, make more significant, have a more significant impact. Things like wanting to have a lobbyist or we don't have a lobbyist now. We leverage our members' relationships when we need to do that kind of thing. But to have a bigger impact, we need some more tools in the toolbox. And you really can't do that without a strong foundation. And we have, like a lot of associations, work with an association management company. That does a lot of your back office and kind of your operations, your accounting, your IT, those kinds of things. We're really at a point where we need to bring that in-house. So this is a very kind of tactical thing of transitioning our accounting system, getting our membership database into the modern century and getting our website updated. Those are all things right now. That's what's next. That's what's on my mind. That's one of the main reasons we hired Andrea, and I'm so excited to have her because that's her wheelhouse. So I can continue to add the value and service our members, go out and tell the story, connect people and do all the things that I do while, together she's working on that piece of it. So I expect by end of second quarter, maybe late summer, that we'll be able to accelerate from there. It's, you don't want to be building on a house of cards. And the last year, because of some of our growth plans and the things that I want to have happen, not to mention our board, I'm not getting enough sleep, to be honest with you. Like, this event was a lot to pull off, and, we have aggressive plans. We want to do a lot of things. We are accelerating, but we need that strong foundation to build from. So that's kind of what's next. And then all the fun stuff's going to come.
Right.
And we'll have the ability to do life cycle assessment, for example, to get that done well and to get it done right. It's not just you and me sitting down and calculating something on the back of a napkin. It's a big project, and it's done by specialized sustainability companies. And we have a project now we want to finish. We're partway through, but I think the next step's $150,000, and that's, for a small membership funded organization, that's a big lift.
Right.
So I'm looking forward to doing some of those projects, and that's why the growth is important, so we can fund those. So that's going to be coming next year, and we intend to fund a couple of those for the recycled materials that we're, again, trying to lift up and support more market development so our members can be more successful. So that'll be coming next. But first, the foundation.
So as I mentioned, just a quick fire questions. You don't have to take too much time answering any of them, but what's one leadership lesson that you live by?
But what's on top of my mind right now, I think, because of the importance of relationships, and also I think it's important to navigate conflict. So one of the things I've done throughout my career, and I think is a really important leadership skill and something to continuously work on, because we're all guilty of it sometimes, is really transparency. And if you have an issue with how something's done or someone, have the courage to be face to face, right? None of us like conflict, but the worst thing about not resolving conflict is how it comes out in other ways. Nobody has time for drama, right? And so you want all of the people around you to play at a higher, better level. So don't let those things that are festering, that are bothering you, go unresolved, because it's unproductive and it kind of distracts you. So I think conflict resolution, the transparency and honesty of, hey, I have an issue with this. Can we talk about it? Because maybe if you understand my perspective and I understand yours, we'll find a common ground that's actually better. And just like right person, right seat, we can set it aside, solve maybe not the most important issue, but you know how things can kind of fester. And so I think that's super important, especially I think these days it's relevant for me as I have almost a 20-person board, so it's like having 20 different managers, right? And they're never all going to agree, and they're never going to give you all the same input. So it's a lot to navigate, and that's something I'm still learning, to kind of hone some skills there. But I think that this day and age, we're being remote, being very fragmented, I think, as a workforce, being very flat as a workforce. It's more important than ever because these relationships are hard, forming relationships over Zoom or sitting on a podcast here and, kind of doing it in the public eye. I think it's important to be transparent, to be honest, and not be afraid of conflict. Conflict's healthy. It makes us better.
What's a mistake that has helped you grow as a leader?
Not listening to my gut instinct. There are times where, in hindsight, when something didn't go the way you had hoped it would or the way you envisioned it, there was probably some little signal in your gut that told you, I don't know if this is going to work out. You should really listen, because especially, maybe not for the young person who hasn't had enough experiences. I feel like sometimes it's like AI, right? I think the older we get, the better our algorithms are, because we've taken in a lot of information and we've processed it. So we have to have some confidence that that voice that's speaking to us probably has something to say and we need to listen to it. By and large, when I haven't, that's when mistakes are made or I've missed an opportunity, right? Or flat ass was wrong. So you kind of admit it sometimes.
Completely agree. Sometimes in desperation as well, when you really want something to happen or work, it kind of clouds your judgment massively, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And that's where you're exactly right. And that's where the perspective comes in and why I like to ask questions, because it's like, am I really seeing this from the right way, right? Because there's probably a blind spot I have. We all have them.
Lastly, what's the best way for professionals to build a network in this industry?
Come to conferences like this, sit down with people like you and have podcasts. And seriously, if there was one thing, and you asked this a little bit earlier, if I really think about it, when I started going to trade shows, and not just trade shows, but conferences. Like I said this earlier, I don't know if you were in the room when I kicked off our conference, something I'm very passionate about, particularly coming from the vendor side or a solution provider, technology provider. If you're selling into a market, don't sit at your booth. The best thing you could do when you go to a conference is sit in that conference room all day, because that's the best market research you'll ever get. It's the best training about your customer and what the needs are. When I started doing that, that's when I started to form the most important relationships and get traction with the work I was doing, because I understood the industry I'm in better. I understood my place in it. I understood what I had to offer. So yeah, I think the best thing a young person could do, the best lesson learned is back to that information, right? And asking questions. Take every opportunity you can to learn and to read and meet people, right? Don't be afraid in a networking event. You know, it kind of sucks to network sometimes, right? If you're having an off day or you're tired or you're not feeling particularly communicative or, don't feel like a good conversationalist, networking can really suck. But it kind of sucks for it. Everybody's feeling the same way. And the best thing you can do is go grab somebody and say, hey, what brought you here? Where are you from? What are you looking for? I mean, just start a conversation. 9 times out of 10, I've learned something really interesting from whoever I do that with, and have formed some of the best friendships and best industry relationships ever.
Well, Terri, thank you so much for joining us on this
been
episode
fun.
of Trust Talk. Yeah.
So interesting. Thank you, Bilal. I appreciate it.
No problem at all.